In the last section, we started working on our blog post model, and then we took a quick pause and we got to the point in time at which I said that we need to figure out how to reference one type of model from another model. So we've already seen how to tie together documents with a sub-document collection, and we did so inside of our user model. So inside of here, we had created a post schema, and we just said, hey, a user is going to have an array of posts. Each of those posts needs to follow the post schema. That was only applicable to when we set up a sub-document type of reference. Inside of our blog post, however, we want to have an actual reference to another collection. So the case of sub-documents versus referencing collections is a little bit different. I don't really have a great lead-in for this, so I think the best way to go is probably going to be to just add in the code, and then we'll talk about exactly what it's doing. So I'm going to add in a new key here. It's going to be comments. And then inside of it, we're going to, or for its value, we're going to place an array that's going to contain an object. And then this object will have a type of schema.types.object ID, and then also a ref property. And here I'm going to give myself just a little bit more space so you can read everything that's going on. For the ref property, we're going to assign it comment, like so. All right. So this vaguely looks similar to the post schema that we were just looking at inside of our user model. So here's the post schema right here. A blog post will have many comments associated with it. So we pass an array to indicate that we expect to have many different comments inside of this relation. Then inside of a configuration object, we specify the type of this reference, or the type that's going to sit inside of here. This type is going to point off to a record that is sitting in a different collection. So we are not nesting documents here. We are passing a reference off to another model or another document sitting in a comment collection. To indicate that we are going to pass a reference to a document in another collection, we say that we are going to have a type of object ID. We then also specify a ref of comment. Now the ref right here is a little bit interesting, and this is working very closely with Mongoose. Internally, when MongoDB stores this record, there will be an array of IDs here. That ID will eventually need to be kind of buttoned up and turn it into an actual Mongoose model, right? That's like eventually what we want to work with. To make sure that Mongoose understands what type or what collection it needs to look at to figure out where this ID belongs to, does this thing belong to a comment or a user or a post, or what is it? We assign this ref right here. The ref will be matched up against the model definition. So I'm going to flip back over to the user file and then scroll down a little bit. And if you recall, when we created our user, we told Mongoose that it was going to be receiving a new model that would be called user. So this user string right here is of the same kind of in the same vein as this ref right here, this comment. So because I'm specifying comment, this means that once we go over to our comment.js file and add in some configuration in here and create the comment model, that will be what Mongoose uses to populate each of the different comments that are going to sit inside this array. Okay, so we got that. The last thing we have to do after finishing up our blog post schema is declare the actual model. So we'll say const blog post equals mongoose.model, and this is going to be a blog post, and it's going to use the blog post schema. And finally at the bottom, we'll do all our module.exports equals blog post. Okay, so this is looking pretty good so far for our actual blog post. Let's flip over to our comment file and start putting in the schema for that as well. At the top, we'll go through some more of the boilerplate. So const mongoose equals require mongoose. We'll grab off the schema object, so mongoose.schema. And then we can create our comment schema. So this equals new schema. I think that each of our comments will probably just have some amount of content which will be a string. So it'll have a content property. It doesn't really need a title or anything like that, just some amount of content. Then we need to make sure that we also provide a reference to the user who made this comment. So that's the ID here. We're going to, or idea, that's how we're going to record which user made each comment. We're going to have a reference to the author of this comment. Now you'll notice that in our blog post, we assigned the list of comments that belong to a particular blog post to a value, or a key, excuse me, called comments. The key that we assign there, it can be anything that we want to call it. So this is especially relevant inside of our comment, because in a comment, we can either say, well, here's the user that this comment belongs to. It might also make sense to say that this was the author of the comment. It's really totally up to you which way you want to go. Personally, I like sticking with user because since there's probably only going to be one user associated with the comment, it's kind of reasonably implied that the user associated with this thing is probably going to be the author. But if I started having like, a user who wrote the comment and then maybe like another user who reviewed it or something like that, then I might do something like an author and a reviewer, and both of these would refer to a user. So this is when I would start to apply different terminology to the property. But we're going to stick with user because we only have one user who's going to be referenced here. Now for the user property, unlike the blog post where we could have many comments, and so we pointed it to an array, which indicated there could be many comments associated with the blog post, we will only have a single user associated with an actual comment. So rather than assigning an array to this, we're only going to we're only going to assign an object, which is going to be a configuration object. So on here, we're going to specify the type, which will also be what we just saw a moment ago, schema.types.objectID. And then we'll also specify the ref. So whenever we specify the ref, we definitely want to triple check, really make sure that we're getting the name of the model correct. So if I go over to my user file, I'm inside the user file right now, and I scroll down to the bottom, when we register the user model with Mongoose, we called it lowercase user. So I'm going to make sure that I use that appropriate ref over here. So I'll say user like so. Then finally down at the bottom, we will register this thing with Mongoose. So I'll say const comment equals mongoose.model. This will be a comment, and this will use the comment schema. And then finally, we'll do our module exports for comment. Now, I did just introduce a very subtle bug in here having to do with the ref system. You'll notice that inside of this comment file, I used a string of lowercase comment, but over in my blog post, when I set up the ref, I used uppercase comment. And so that's definitely a mistake on my part. I need to make sure that I do the right thing here. So I'm going to replace the comment ref over here, and I'm going to make sure that it's a lowercase as well. It doesn't really matter which way you go, whether you use uppercase or lowercase, really doesn't matter. The only thing I recommend is that you stay consistent among all your different model files. So inside of my user file, I have lowercase user. In my blog post, I have lowercase blog post. And comment, lowercase comment. I think you get the idea. Okay, so we've now wired up both our blog post and our comment, and we've set up an association between the blog post and the comment and the user. The last thing we have to do is make sure that we somehow associate the user with the blog post. And once we do that, we will be in a great spot to start writing some tests and figure out how these different models are going to work together.